good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. To be perfectly honest, I haven't a clue what we're going to talk about. But as we go along, I hope the inspiration will come to me. We arrived in Israel yesterday, and before that we had spent a couple of days in London with Vicky Mackenzie, who is the author of my biography, Cave in the Snow. And she had a book lying on her table, which was by Sogyal Rinpoche, and it's called Glimpse by Glimpse. So it's just every page is a little saying of Sogyal Rinpoche's. So I sort of sent up a prayer and said, what shall I talk about in Israel? And open the book. And it was a passage about compassion and how important compassion is for developing, how important suffering is in order to develop compassion for the suffering of others. And so I thought, yes, that is a good theme for Israel. Basically, when we encounter pain and difficulties and suffering, we have a choice. Either we can turn in on ourselves and use it to make ourselves feel more sorry for ourselves and develop an attitude of cutting out the suffering of other people, that we focus in on our own grief, our own pain, and identify ourselves with that. It's very important to understand that the sense of self, our ego, is actually very happy to be miserable. Because when we are thinking of our own suffering or the suffering of our loved ones, and we are totally only focused on that, it's all about me, and mine. And so the ego is very happy because we're thinking about the ego, basically. And so this can very easily happen, especially when people are in abusive situations or they are suffering a lot for various reasons, ill health and loss and, maybe a very traumatic history, that they close in on themselves and only consider their own suffering and identify themselves with that suffering. And this is maybe not so skillful. The other choice, which this passage in the book recommended, was that we use our pain and suffering as a way to open up the heart to have empathy for the pain and suffering of others. If we ourselves have never suffered, it's hard for us to understand what it is like to suffer. Because, we're okay. In fact, in Buddhism, which has 26 levels of celestial planes, heavens, all of them, they're increasingly subtle, but all of them are very pleasurable. Everything you want, you get. You have bodies of light, no sickness, no aging. It's considered that you only can stay there for as long as the good karma that created the fact you got reborn there lasts. When it's finished, you're gone. But the point is, whether you believe in heavens or not, the point is that spiritually, it's regarded as a dead end, not something to be aspired to. And the reason is that it's too pleasurable. And since it's so pleasurable, there's no challenge to develop inwardly, to cultivate a path. On the other hand, in Buddhist cosmology, there are the lower realms and of unmitigated suffering, which come as a result of negative actions. And again, there it's regarded as being unhelpful spiritually, because one is so engrossed in one's own suffering that one again cannot open the heart to have compassion for other beings. So the human realm, which we all share, is considered to be the very, very best place for spiritual cultivation, because we have this balance of pleasure and pain, both. And so, therefore, since pleasure is pleasurable, we are not going to discuss that so much. What we're going to talk about more is how to deal skillfully with difficulties and painful circumstances. And how, as the text which I said, it emphasized that we use the difficulties and the painful experiences not to glorify pain and suffering, and not to glorify ourselves for undergoing pain and suffering, but to open up the heart towards empathy and understanding, compassion for the pain and suffering of others. Because this is a very important quality which, to make us truly human, we need to develop. In Buddhism, the nature of our ultimate mind is considered to be the combination of wisdom, of truly seeing things as they really are, and compassion. That the heart has to open to feel empathy with all sentient beings. Recently, we had an influx of young girls into our nunnery. We got these suddenly 25 young girls from remote Himalayan villages. And some of them, as you probably saw on the pictures, were very young. We were quite shocked. But then somebody, after a few weeks of being in the nunnery, somebody said to one of the young girls, "Oh, well, isn't it nice now you're here, you can pray for your mother and for your family?" And the little girl said, "We pray for all sentient beings." And I was very happy to hear that she got that much. Compassion is for all sentient beings, not just me, my family, my friends, my tribe, my race, all sentient beings. All sentient beings means not just other humans, but animals, creatures that live in the oceans and the rivers, beings that live in the sky, insects. Just today we got an email saying that France has finally legislated that animals are living sentient beings. How many of these politicians had dogs? The idea being that animals were just part of your possessions, your property. They weren't sentient, they didn't feel. But everyone who has animals knows that animals feel. Of course they do, and they have great love. So this question of compassion is something which is very important for all of us. Because compassion, which means suffering with others, is an extremely important part of our essential nature as human beings. And I think in Israel especially, this is a wonderful country for spiritual cultivation, because you have the challenges right in front of you. And to really look at the mind and to see, how much we create inwardly territorial boundaries. Yes, I'm going to feel love and compassion for this group, but I won't feel love and compassion for that group. And so that kind of compassion isn't unconditioned compassion. It's a very conditional compassion, a very conditional love. I will love people that belong to me because they're an extension of me, but other people don't count. So this is a very, very good place to really look into the mind and see just how narrow or how vast our hearts really are. Each one of us, we have to really look at our prejudices and recognize that all beings have what is called Buddha nature. Buddha nature means that our essential nature is completely pure and perfect. We identify basically with all the wrong things, especially we identify with if I say, who are you? You will tell me your name, and you will maybe tell me what your job is, but inwardly we are identifying with our name, our family, our gender, our race, our nationality, and our memories of our childhood and as we become adults, and our views, our beliefs, our ideas, our likes, our dislikes, all of this we put together and we say, this is me. But from the Buddhist perspective, actually all of that is who we are not. This is like a role which we are playing. It's not the actor behind the role. Well, of course, in Buddhism there's not really an actor behind the role, but we'll leave that. The point is that in the meantime we are identifying with the role, but the role is very fine, and if you are a good actor you play the role to the best of your abilities, but nonetheless in the end you don't really believe that's who you really are. That's the difference. You can discard the role You recognize you play it the best you can, but it's not who you really are. And so it's very important to recognize that everybody that we meet is just playing a role. That it's not their real nature. And that doesn't matter what race we belong to, what gender we belong to, what nationality. We're all just playing roles. And projecting this movie in which we are playing the starring part. So where does compassion come into this? Compassion is the recognition that just as I would rather be happy and avoid pain, so all beings want to be happy and avoid pain. Very few beings really choose to suffer. The fact that very few beings choose to suffer doesn't mean that they don't suffer. But they don't choose that. All beings, in their hearts, want happiness. They want peace. They want to feel safe. Isn't it? So, each one of us, if we are sincere, we cannot solve the problems of all the world. We cannot solve all the problems of the country where we live. But we can, to the best of our abilities, live our life in a way which brings happiness to as many people as possible and avoids bringing suffering. So we start with ourselves. Because if inside ourselves we are not at peace, if we are at war within ourselves, we are going to be at war with others too. Most of the people who are, aggressive, rude, difficult, it's because inside they are in conflict. If we are in conflict inside, we will generate conflict outside. And so therefore, the first step is to try to bring some peace into our inner war zone. And so in Buddhist practice, the first step, really, is to learn how to make the mind more calm, more centered, and at the same time to generate wholesome, kind thoughts, first towards oneself and then outwardly towards others. So it's very important that we look first not just at the external problems, but the internal problems. Because our internal problems are what generate the external problems. I mean, most of the problems in the world is because it's controlled by people who themselves are out of control. They don't have control over their own minds or their own emotions, and then that gets projected out into all their policies. Someone who has a peaceful, kind heart would not even think of harming another. Why would they? What for? So it's very important in your country especially that really you start thinking how narrow or how open your mind really is. to embrace all beings, recognizing that under the disguise of race and nationality and religion and beliefs, we are all human beings. We are all human beings wanting happiness, not wanting suffering, and inherently we all have what is called Buddha nature. That makes no difference, high or low. Everybody has the essence of our mind is completely pure. It's not true that we are sinners. Actually, if we just even get a glimpse of our true mind, then it's something incredibly vast and open and spacious. It's not this little brain in which we run around like a rat in a cage. Mind is a very interesting thing, and even the neuroscientists today, they still say we know a lot about the brain, but we haven't found the mind. Mind is something very vast. It's compared to the sky because it has no center. You cannot grasp it and say it's my mind. It's something very vast and open, spacious. And it has no boundaries. Like space, it's everywhere. If you think of space, then we can think of the sky, we can think of this auditorium. If I ask you what is in this auditorium, you would say, well, there was tables and there were chairs and there were people. There was a stage. But really there's space. If there was no space, we couldn't exist. There would be no chairs and tables and people. And those tables and chairs and people are also space. So therefore space is all-pervading. And for this reason it is compared with the nature of the mind, which is all-pervading. Not this little brain which is trapped between, in our head. We're not talking about that. We're talking about a very much deeper level of awareness. So it's compared to the sky because you can't grasp it and think this is me. But at the same time, it's not like the sky because it is conscious. The sky is not conscious. But the very essence of our mind is awareness. And this we all share. This is the point. Our individual egos make up our little sense of me versus others. But when we go beyond our ego, then that sense of I and others, it doesn't pertain. It's not there. We recognize our interconnection with all beings. So this is the true reality. And this is why, as human beings, we need to get back to our true nature. Because as long as the ego is running things, we have chaos. As we see in the world. The world is run by egomaniacs. And look what harm. So we need, basically the world is insane. I mean, we can see this. In fact, it is in many ways the one thing which sometimes makes me doubt rebirth is the fact that you would consider, if we keep coming back again and again, we've learned something by now. But how is it that every time we end up being so stupid again? Isn't it? When will we ever learn? For a start, that violence only brings violence. I mean, anybody can see that. Anybody. The Buddha said that hatred never ceases by hate. He said, hatred never ceases with hatred. Hatred only ceases with non-hatred. This is an eternal law. And it's so obvious. If I hit you and you hit me back, and then I'll hit you harder, and then you'll hit me harder, and I mean, anybody knows that. That violence doesn't solve anything. Violence is based on fear. So what we have to do is deal with the fear. Why are we fearful? How can we deal with that? So that we do not just act in such a mindless way. I mean, as long as one has a policy of an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, we all end up blind and toothless. I mean, anybody can see that. It doesn't work. It never has worked. In all the thousands of years we've been on this planet, it still is not working. You know that, almost better than anyone on this planet, that it doesn't work. So, what to do? I mean, everybody's asking, well, what to do? What's the solution? And I mean, I don't know what to do. If I could give you the formula for how to deal with this situation, I mean, I could get the Nobel Peace Prize for solving the Middle East problems. But it seems to me that really our external situation is a reflection of our internal state of mind. Because how we think, that's how we speak, and how we act. We don't act and speak without intention. So we have to look at our intention. The intention, the choices in our thinking and in our speech and our action, is it based on negative roots of aggression and anger and hatred, on greed and attachment and grasping, on basic delusion and ignorance and self-promotion, envy, jealousy, arrogance, very negative roots which disturb the mind, make the mind not peaceful, and cause so much problems in this world? Or are our thoughts and words and deeds based on skillful roots, based on kindness, generosity, wishing well for others, rejoicing in others' happiness, and so forth? These feelings of kindness and empathy and generosity, giving, sharing, these make the heart feel happy. I mean, psychologically, it makes so much sense. And we are the ones who are in charge of our own mind. Only we can cultivate our mind. Nobody can do it for us. They can give us hints, they can give us techniques, they can give us encouragement, but in the end, how we live in our mind is up to us. Isn't it? And the point is that apart from, the outer repercussions of having a group of people with kind, compassionate, peaceful minds, for each one of us, we live in our mind. We take our mind with us everywhere, even in our sleep. We cannot leave our mind behind. What kind of mind are we living in? Isn't it? I mean, you have this country and you try to beautify it and make it a pleasant place for you to live in. You grow trees and keep it clean. And you have your homes, your houses, your apartments, your rooms, which you keep clean, you decorate it nicely, you try to make it a pleasing environment. And we have our bodies, which we keep clean, and we eat the right foods, and we, exercise, and we try to make ourselves look attractive and keep healthy and fit. But the place we really live is in our mind. And how much time and effort do we give to making our mind a pleasant place in which to dwell? To cleaning it, to opening up the windows to let some fresh air in, to decorate it beautifully, to make it a fit place to stay, so that we live in our mind comfortably. And we are at home in our mind. Our mind is a friend to us. It's very important. Because if we don't have a peaceful, friendly mind, then it's very hard to be peaceful and friendly to our families, in our workplace, with our neighbors, and in the country, and from there to the world. The kind of society we have reflects the minds of the people living in that society. So each one of us is culpable for the society we live in. Who made the rules? Who elected the politicians who made the rules? Who goes along with the rules which have been made? So each of us is responsible. We cannot just put the blame on other people. Each one of us has the responsibility to develop ourselves, to develop our minds, to open up our heart. So often people feel quite helpless and hopeless. They think, what can I do? I'm just one. But each one of us is not sealed in a bubble. Each one of us is constantly interacting with other beings. And so even on that level, how much do we spend each day trying to make others happy? As I say, our colleagues, our family, the people we meet, are we kind? Is our speech kind? Do we make people feel better for having met us, or worse? If a society is full of people who are kind to each other, all other, then that is a very different society from one where people disregard each other, speak rudely to each other or despise each other. All of you have to ask yourselves, what have you learned from your history? Honestly and truthfully, if you think you're a suffering nation who have been ill-used throughout history, then I think you honestly and truthfully should ask yourself, what can I learn from this? How not to treat people. That just as we do not like to be treated unkindly, so all beings do not want to be treated unkindly. Then your history has a meaning. You've learned something, much more than most of the world has managed to learn. You've grown up from those experiences. You've matured. You've learned that because of your own sufferings, you can use it to have compassion and empathy for the sufferings of others. That's a huge lesson. Really, I can't believe that you can't learn that much. If you don't like the way people treat you, don't treat other people like that. Isn't that? So obvious. So, all beings want to be happy. No being wants to suffer. So, all beings are equal in this. It's nothing to do with race, it's nothing to do with nationality, it's nothing to do with gender, it's nothing to do with education, it's to do with our common humanity. And the ability as human beings to realize our true potential and not to identify which is lowest in us, to identify with that which is highest in us. Then we can feel this lifetime was well lived. Really, at the end you have to ask, what have I done with this life? How have I used it to benefit myself and to benefit others? And really used it to bring the most people possible to have benefited just from having known us. We all can do this, but we don't. So we have to ask ourselves also, why don't we? We all know that being nasty is not a good thing, isn't it? Everybody knows that. His Holiness the Dalai Lama says that, sometimes he says, my religion is kindness. So that much we can all do. It doesn't matter what we believe or what we don't believe. Are we kind to everyone? Do we genuinely look into the eyes of all other beings and see their innate goodness and respond to that? It's not a matter of Buddhism or Judaism or Christianity or Islam or anything. It's a matter of getting back to our basic, genuine humanity and respecting that which is good within ourselves and good within others, and cultivating that. And not giving in to the lowest in our nature. Learning what has our life, what has our history taught us, so that we can evolve into our true potential instead of devolve. Isn't it? So truly, my wish is that, all of you here present may make friends with yourselves and then make friends with the rest of the world, Be friends of all the world, not just those that you, in this lifetime, happen to be in closer contact with or related to. All beings. Isn't it? This troubled nation can be such an example for the rest of the world. Really. The potential is there. You have to work at it. It's very difficult. But even the most seemingly insoluble problems can be solved if one has the right attitude, if one wants to solve them. You have such a great opportunity to really be a leading light in the world. But it depends on each one of you doing their bit, making their contribution, not waiting for someone else to do it first. Each one of us has that responsibility, isn't it? So truly, may this become a very great nation and really an example for others to follow and to emulate. The potential is there. Whether or not the potential is realized depends on each one of you. You can't put it all in the hands of politicians. Politicians always mess things up, as we know. But you are the people. You have a voice. But it needs to be a united voice. A voice for the good. Anyway, we have not so much time, so maybe we'll take some questions. Are there any?
Hi,
yes.
I have one question.
Yeah.
You talk in the lecture about the question, who are you? That a lot of people don't know how to answer or just say the name or something like that. And I want to know how you answer that question when someone...
Oh, that's a huge question. That's a huge question. But basically, Buddhism is saying that we are, and not just Buddhism, all genuine spiritual traditions are saying that we are not the small self who we identify with, that we are something so much greater, so much more, and at the same time so much less than who we normally identify with. And that this is, once we discover that it's a whole shift in consciousness, that we normally identify with our very gross consciousness. And the point of meditation is basically to bring us back to a much more subtle level of consciousness, which is beyond the ego, beyond the sense of I versus you or other. And as I say, not just Buddhism, although Buddhism is the most clear about, non-self, but all genuine spiritual traditions recognize that we are grasping onto and attached to and identified with all the qualities which are not our true self, and that there's something beyond that which is something so much more profound and so much more vast. And it's like, in Buddhism, it's compared with waking up, that we're all dreaming. And as we know, in ordinary life, we are asleep and we dream we're waking up, but we're not really awake. But when we finally wake up, we know it's a whole shift in consciousness from the dream state, even though during the dream state we think it's real. But when we wake up from the dream state, we can say, oh, that was just a dream. So what they're saying is that even when we wake up and say, oh, that was just a dream, we're still dreaming. There is actually, beyond that, a really awakened state. And when we attain that, then we recognize how normally we just live within our projections. And that we need to get back to our source. That's what meditation eventually is all about, is stripping off, like an onion, layers and layers of our false identifications, because then it's a freedom. It's a liberation from the stranglehold of the ego, which normally causes us, so many problems, even while we think it's going to make us happy. In the end, it just creates more conflicts, more difficulties. Because people spend so much time trying to make themselves happy, but, mostly they don't succeed too well, or only for a very short time something happens, and they're in pain again. But the true nature of our being is beyond these ordinary ideas of pain and pleasure. But its nature is wisdom and compassion. Clear seeing.
I would like to ask you, you mentioned that you work with women who were traumatized and carry a lot of pain and suffering inside. Is there something special or different, or how do you work with very deep scars and women who suffered atrocities and big suffering?
Well, I myself am not especially working with women suffering from trauma. I mean, some of our nuns did spend, the Tibetan nuns did spend a time in Tibetan prisons, but they don't really talk about it much, and they've dedicated their life to meditation. I think with trauma, it's a very... it depends what the trauma was, but I think that the first thing to do is to recognize it and to accept it, and then to work on it. There are, of course, people who are specialized in that. Sometimes meditation doesn't help. It depends what the trauma was, but sometimes it's too overpowering. If they try to uncover it too soon, then it cannot be dealt with unless they have very skillful teachers to help them and lead them. It's hard to answer the question because it depends on the circumstances. But definitely one needs compassion. One needs tremendous compassion to oneself. And the sense of forgiveness and love. It's not egoistic. It's the irony is that until we have compassion and love for others, for ourselves, we cannot have it for others. It's like we have to forgive ourselves and reconcile ourselves with ourselves, like healing an inner wound. So compassion meditations and something called sending and taking, this giving and taking is a very useful meditation also for helping people to reconcile with their own inner pain and their own inner trauma, not by suppressing it and not by gloating on it or scratching it like a wound, just endlessly scratching it until it just becomes more and more of a wound. We have to heal it. We have to put balm on it and allow it to get in the fresh air and heal. And that can be helped a lot by skillful meditations on compassion, directed first towards oneself. And if it was a trauma caused by others, then also extended towards that person, also the perpetrator. Because until we forgive them and have compassion for them and their state of mind, compassion and forgiveness doesn't mean condoning. I mean, if something bad was happening, we don't condone that action. But nonetheless, one can open one's heart to have compassion and forgiveness, because without that, one doesn't heal. And that goes for a nation too. If you're always just endlessly scratching the scabs, it's not going to heal. You need to put balm on it and allow it to, by nature, to heal itself. Okay, so we can leave it there, which is good because they want us out.
One more.
If it's a nice, easy, simple.
It's a very, very nice. It's short and precise. In a state of enlightenment, all thoughts cease, or is it a process? And thoughts keep coming?
In the moment of, what do we mean by enlightenment? That is always also a very loaded term. But in the moment of genuine realization, it probably transcends ordinary conceptual thinking. Because our thinking mind is very limited. It's only the gross level of the mind. It's the waves on the ocean, but there's all the huge depths of the ocean. So at the moment of any genuine realization, it transcends thoughts. And then, of course, after that, usually the conceptual mind takes it up again and starts to analyze it, which is sometimes helpful and sometimes counterproductive. An enlightened being still thinks. Right? It's nothing wrong with the thoughts. The thoughts are not the problem. The problem is that we identify with our thoughts. We don't recognize that we have thoughts, but we are not the thoughts. Those are just, that's just the brain thinking. It's not who we really are. So an enlightened person is more awake than we are and makes use of the tool of conceptual thinking, but they're not fooled by this conceptual thinking. They know that's all it is, and they also have a much deeper level of awareness which goes far beyond the thought pattern. It's like if you think of thoughts as the clouds, then you have the clouds, but you also have the vastness of the sky. Without the sky, there could not be clouds, but the sky itself is not the clouds. Sanandia Tanjese Bani Tony Padana Panzene Chekana Diabala to Bayes Episole to Adua Jua Jamba Pao Jida Jamba Dangundu Samode and Dida Kunji Jesu Dolochin Gewa Dida Tanjiratu Mua Chancho Sencho Rimbo Chimache Pananje Chichi Wanyamba Mepa Angone Gondu Pewai Shu. So thank you all very much. May you all be well and happy, truly, and your country also.